Hello, and welcome to the Long Island Local Podcast, brought to you by Audio Workstations here in Bohemia, New York. Let's jump right into the conversation with a Long Island local business owner. Today, we have the pleasure of interviewing Gary Kiyan of Dragon Boy Enterprises. Gary, thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Glad to be with you.
Full disclosure to everyone, today's a bit of a crossover episode because this is a business-focused podcast, but we've been up to some music things today. Just before this recording, we've recorded a YouTube video about an acoustic guitar. Spoiler alert, music is one of Gary's things, among others, in business. And so today we'll be talking about music and the business of music a little bit, the journey you've been on with music and its challenges, and also real estate consulting, which is something I don't know much about. I'm eager to learn. And then also coaching, right? And that the coaching is both life and business coaching. So a Renaissance man, no doubt. When I get two or more accolades or job descriptions to read, we are definitely in the Renaissance zone. So thanks for coming down and talking about that, and a little bit of martial arts experience, as I understand it. So that's a fourth thing. We're definitely into the Renaissance territory there.
The martial arts was a foundation for a lot of the other things I created. It was unintentional. I lost a lot of my family when I was very young.
I'm sorry.
My mother worked in the medical industry and was connected to a Japanese doctor who happened to be a high-level judo player.
Wow.
And they saw after my father died, I was very young. I was about 10, and I was starting to get into a bad space and not reacting well and doing bad things. Went from a good kid to a bad kid. And basically one day he just, threw a uniform on my bed and gave me an address and told me to meet him there. And I had to travel into Manhattan, which I had never done on my own before.
Where were you traveling from?
I was traveling from roughly Forest Hills in Queens, where I grew up, and the school that he brought me to was a place called New York Dojo, which was actually at that time the oldest martial arts club in the mainland United States, and because there were older clubs out in Hawaii, and there was a Japanese sensei that I knew as George Yoshida, who came over here in around 1910 in a junk ship with 150 caneback chairs that he traded to an Irish pub in order to have the basement for a judo club.
Wow.
And he was one of the highest-ranking judokas in the world. And he was the one who prepared all the black belts in the East Coast for their test before the judges from Japan that would give you a black belt. When you're a judo player, it's kind of like the sport of jiu-jitsu, and you can't get a black belt without competing.
Okay.
So you have to go to these tournaments, get enough points, and then you do a special kata that they judge. And it's a very formal thing that you have to do perfectly, and he was the guy that trained people on how to do that all across the East Coast. So I was very fortunate. I got to train with the best in the world.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah, and what happened was from that is it gave me a very good foundation. I went from a kid with no father to about 20 fathers because they all kind of semi-adopted me.
Okay.
I was the only kid training in the school, and I was training with all men.
So how old were you and how old was everyone? Everyone else was older?
I trained there from roughly 13-ish to about 20.
Wow.
And maybe before about 19 or so, I got out of that. Actually, my music career started pulling me away from that at one point as I started getting going with music, and that became my real passion in life. But it gave me a great foundation. You know, it was the kind of thing when I had graduation, a black belt would come. When I went to my prom, a black belt would take, one of the guys from the school would take me around, and they gave me faith that there were good people in the world. That was one thing. Also, martial arts taught me something very significant. It taught me about discipline. The good aspect of discipline, because there's two types. There's the kind that is inflicted upon you by others and the kind that you afflict upon yourself. So in my coaching life, kind of what I like to say, if you don't discipline yourself, someone will come along and discipline you as well, right? If you don't drive within the law, you get pulled over and you get a ticket.
Sure.
So I try to teach people that they should embrace discipline in order to reach their best self, and also to avoid people telling them what to do, which most of us don't like, right?
Right. Find your own discipline before someone else tries to find it for you.
Yes, you can be your own leader in that regard. So I did my martial arts training, and I always someone who loved music, and I was always trying to get involved. I did a lot of vocalization as a kid. In fact, I was actually seen as in my elementary school as a child prodigy in terms of music. And they put me into a special music program And what happened is eventually I played the trumpet, I did vocalization, and eventually I found my love, which was the guitar. And that basically, all bets were off after that, and I just picked that up and never put it down. And unfortunately, I had the first of a series of accidents where I hurt my hand. Actually, I was getting ready for one of my first tours, and I was bitten by a dog in my left hand, severely damaged my hand up to my arm because of tendons and things like that. It took about a year and a half, 2 years to recover from that.
Wow. How old were you when this happened?
Then I was more in the 18 to 20 range.
Okay. It's a rough time to have an accident like that when you're first getting into guitar.
Yeah, I had done my first performances around 17, and I had some success. And I just, life is, we were talking before, luck is timing. I met some good people. They liked what I was doing. They gave me opportunities, and I ran with it. But then I had this horrific accident, and at first I was holding a funeral for my life. I thought everything was over for me. I was fortunate enough to discover Django Reinhardt, the gypsy jazz guitar player who only had like 2 working fingers on his left hand.
Okay.
And then the great part about that, Matt, was that at that point I realized never to feel sorry for myself, just to deal with the situation and take the drama out of it.
Yeah.
So what happens in most of our life, we learn to live our life by watching movies and television. What is that? It's very dramatic.
Yes.
They tell a lifetime story in 30 to 90 minutes.
It's hard not to feel like the hero or the anti-hero, the protagonist or the villain or whatever, and dramatize everything around us.
And we tend to over dramatize, and that tends to cloud solutions and finding solutions. So I recovered from that, and I went on. I actually worked my way back. I started having some good success. And then actually more cataclysmic events occurred, even worse. I was hurt in an accident where my spinal cord was damaged. Actually, a few gentlemen tried to accost me on the street. There was an incident that happened earlier in the day. I lived in Manhattan. They tried to accost me, hurt my spine during that. I was fine that day, but the next day I couldn't get out of bed. And that took 2 years to recover from. I was partially paralyzed on the left side of my body.
Wow.
Couldn't do anything. And unfortunately, what happened after that, I finally started getting better, and my mother came down with terminal cancer.
Oh, jeez.
So that was 2.5 years of then tending for her. So now we're 4 years out of things.
Wow.
Well, during the time prior to that, when I had made a little bit of money beforehand, I had invested in real estate. I had a relative in a construction business, and he said, "You're wasting your money, and I'm going to show you a better way." And he showed me how to rehab houses.
Okay.
And I was able to put together contracts and do it. I had made some money from music. I worked with some national performers, made a little bit of dough, and I put it into real estate. And that allowed me to slow down my spending process as a young person where, a little bit too much of this or that, negative things in your life. And I learned a lot about real estate from that. And then when my mother was at her sickest and we were having issues with insurance and stuff, I really needed to make money. And I went into real estate brokerage for a time.
Okay.
I struggled at it in the beginning, but necessity is the mother of invention. I had to make it work, and I did. And I turned it to the point where I became very successful at it. And I had some business education and knowledge prior. And what happened is that some real estate companies picked me up, and actually I developed the practice of training other people. And then what I noticed on that journey was that in the real estate industry, real estate is the cheapest, fastest way for a person to go into business for themselves as a real estate broker. You're like a shop in the mall. But a lot of people fail at it. And why they fail at it is fear. We're all trained to be employees in school. We're not trained to be entrepreneurs. We're trained to arrive at a certain time, to leave at a certain time, to dress a certain way, to behave the right way in the lunchroom, which we rarely do.
Right.
And so it teaches you to be a good employee. It doesn't teach you to do the things that an entrepreneur needs to do. Let me break that down quickly. What does an employee do? Well, an employee follows instructions and does enough work not to get fired.
Right.
An entrepreneur has to make a lot of decisions and has to take a lot of action. I was fortunate to work with a great coach by the name of Tony Robbins for some time, and he pointed out certain things about that were very illuminating to me. So, as he puts it, we all have weak decision-making muscles because we don't often have to make them. When you go to a job, they tell you exactly what you have to do and when you have to do it. And if you do it, you'll get a certain amount of money each week.
Yeah, and then that translated from what you were saying earlier in public education and such, is that it starts out with grades,
Right.
and it's about getting grades, and then eventually we swap out grades for money and titles.
And we start trading time for money.
Yeah.
And what happens at that point is that we're really helping other people achieve their dreams rather than achieving the things that we want to do in life.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened was, from working in real estate and developing a little bit of a reputation for being, one, honest, but also two, aware of how to achieve things, I was giving people training on how to become a better entrepreneur.
Right.
And that was was really changing the complement of people that were successful. In an average real estate office, 10% of the people drive it, and you have to do a lot of customer service. It's a very demanding business, but you can come out of nowhere and you can make millions of dollars if you do it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't be hindered by your fear, because what happens is, if people don't believe they can achieve it, they won't put that much into it. And if they don't put 100% into it, they're not going to make it.
Yeah.
So the way that business works, you put 100% in, you're going to be okay. You put in 80%, you might get nothing back.
Right.
It's very unforgiving in that regard. So as that all evolved, as you're aware, through my music career, I was always writing music, and I always kept doing that through all these other periods that I was transcending to, but my goal was always to get back on the road and do things like that.
And as we mentioned that, we should probably mention that about 10 years ago or a little more, we recorded an album together at a studio that was once owned by our mutual friend, Ray. And that album is called It's About Time. Is that correct?
It's About Time. Great album that you did a fantastic job at
Thank you. I wasn't fishing for compliments, but I appreciate them. And if anyone is interested in hearing one album's example of Gary's music and some of my recording and mixing work, they can go check out It's About Time by Gary, Kiyan and the Dragon Boys on the various streaming platforms.
You can find my website at dragonboymusic.com. I am also, my music is sold on all the major platforms, so Apple Music and iTunes, all that kind of stuff. So what happened was, I kept writing all along the way, and I wanted to transcend things to where I could have my cake and eat it, so to speak. There's an old adage, you can't have your cake and eat it, but I don't know what the sense of having cake is if you can't eat it.
Yes. So, well, I always suppose that what's meant is that there's a certain visual pleasure of perhaps just simply looking at a cake that is not yet eaten, right? It's pretty. So that's in one sense the joy of having it. And then I think the other sense maybe in which it's meant is that the knowledge that there is a cake waiting for you when you are hungry for it is in fact comforting and reassuring.
And that horse chases the apple.
And yes, and then so once you eat the cake, you have relieved yourself of the knowledge that cake awaits. So that's always been my deep philosophical reflection on that statement. I figured I'd share it with you.
I'm an eternal optimist, and the fact that you could draw something optimistic, I salute you on that. I wanted to move forward with things that I wanted to do with my life, and I also found what I advise people to always do is keep the things that you love in your life. So, for example, I continued to train at martial arts throughout much of my life till actually another accident I had more recently, which prevented me from doing that. And I actually became a Taekwondo black belt. I taught at a school in Manhattan for many years.
So that's two different separate styles of martial arts, if everyone's keeping up that you're into.
I'm versed in Judo, Jiu-Jitsu, Taekwondo, and Hapkido.
Oh, so that's four. Okay.
Yeah, and usually what happens is Hapkido is like the Korean version of Aikido. They often teach that as self-defense training in Taekwondo schools. And I was in a judo school that taught Jiu-Jitsu as self-defense, because that's more of the martial art of that type of training. But what's good about it is you learn how to stand-up fighting and you learn ground fighting.
Right.
Which is
right. That's sick. Yeah, I understand that Jiu-Jitsu involves the ground a lot and less rules, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, the other thing about it is about your weight distribution and how to, throw people and stuff like that. And that's about knowing the center of gravity. So it's great training for many, many things. Also, grappling fighting is much tougher than stand-up fighting. And what grappling fighting taught me was not to quit even when I wanted to. So in many matches that ended up on a match where we're grappling, I really thought at times my heart was going to burst, even as I was 17.
Yeah.
So, you don't, wow. But I noticed the other guy wasn't quitting, and so I didn't. And there were matches sometimes that I won where I was exhausted, but I just didn't quit.
Right.
So that's another thing.
The perseverance aspect of it.
It's absolutely important for all of us in life. Everybody will get knocked down. If you get knocked down 10 times, get up 11.
Yeah, I'm not going to sing Tub Thumping by Chumbawamba right now, but for copyright purposes, that's what I'm thinking.
We don't want to get pulled off the air. But so what happened was that I realized that a lot of great people were coming to real estate and they were not assertive enough and they were afraid, and that's why they were failing, not because they were not intelligent enough. Real estate is not a complicated business, but it's not an easy business. You have to work very hard to make it happen, but it's not brain surgery. I think any reasonably intelligent person can do it. It's not a matter if they can. It's a matter of if they will.
Right.
And that's really what it's incredible perseverance and not quitting. So I decided, wow, I've got to get back to some more of my calling, but I still also want to be able to help these folks. And what happened was I started moving more into coaching and mentoring aspect of things. And there was one firm that literally had me coaching 100 people on a regular basis, so it really built up my chops with that.
Wow.
And then what happened was I would leave and move around in the industry. People would approach me and say, look, you're not working with me anymore, but I still want to work with you, and would you help me? And I built a fairly substantial practice of that, all by referral. So I did very little marketing of any kind. I started with a few people, and it built up. And that allowed me the freedom to work more out of my home and also to put my music back online. So we did the album a while back, was about 7, 8 years ago, maybe 9 years ago. And what happened was, not to make people too depressed with my life, but before that album could be really thoroughly promoted, I was hit by a tree coming home from a gig. Ugh. On a stormy night, and it did a lot of damage in my back and my shoulder.
You didn't hit it first, did you?
I wish I would have.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure you didn't start it.
Yeah, and what happened from there was it was another protracted recovery.
Wow.
But I was able to work out of my home with coaching people, and I was able. What happened was that funny things how things work is that over COVID, someone caught a hold of some of my music and promoted it on a playlist, and it became extraordinarily popular. And now we're like 300,000 or 400,000 streams into something that I did years back.
That's so cool. I remember when you first told me about that, because we have been in touch. I was so pleased because I enjoyed making that album, and it's great to know that it finds an audience, even sometimes without the active type of promotion that we're in the music industry all sort of trained to be doing all the time. But
the business has changed, right? Well, you got to be your own record company now.
So, yeah, exactly. But even in that scenario, where some person heard it who decided to put on a playlist, and now all of a sudden that one act exposes it to a lot of other people, and then it begins to snowball in it. What I like about that most is that it's organic, right? That was not like some sort of paid playlist promotion. Somebody legitimately found it without you sort of paying a lot to advertise to them, and liked it, and then included it on a list of their favorite songs. And that's pretty much the most ideal organic type of sharing and growth that anybody could ask for with music. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that.
No, you are 100% correct, and you're actually hitting on a core thing. It really meant a tremendous amount to me. I make music because I have to. I love it. I've loved it my whole life. I've had a lot of opportunities, but through some misfortune, some of those things were taken away from me. It did not change what I love to do. And it didn't change my resolve, because the one thing from the kind of life I had, I learned that you don't want to quit at anything that you really want to do in life. You want to see it through. Because it's better to know, or whether it wins, loses, or fails, it's better to do it than not to do it. That's really my point. We're all meant in this life to take action and to do things with our time. And in one of the songs I've penned, there's a lyric that says, taking days for granted is road to hell. And I sincerely mean that. From losing family at an early age, from helping so many other people through coaching through so many years, and the kind of integrity I learned through martial arts, I just really embraced the sanctity of life, and that we have a certain amount of time to do the best we can. The other interesting thing is that I believe people are going to live longer over time if they take control of their health. So in my coaching practice, I try and get people with their health in line and health and nutrition. I'm not a doctor, but I point them in the right direction and let them learn how to better do things, because I believe that people may have more than one profession in their lifetime.
Yeah.
As people live healthily to 80 and 90. You don't have to be limited by how other people define you. You cannot let other people define you in the world, because there's too many people out there that make themselves look good by making other people look bad. There are purists that just simply do their best, but there are many that do not. So the main thing is not to let other people decide who you are, and go out there and go after the things that you really want to do in life.
You mentioned earlier that, or for example, the guitar playing thing, right? You hurt your hand and you thought world is over from a guitar perspective. Then you discovered someone who had perhaps a worse injury than you did and still persevered on guitar. And I'm sure drummers, like, you look at the one-armed drummers.
From Def Leppard.
Yeah, and you think, okay, that's sort of the power of relative comparison in a positive light, where you're utilizing relative comparison to someone else to gain a more positive outlook and motivate yourself, right? And then this other example that you mentioned of people who tend to make themselves look good by making others look bad, that's the dark side.
Well, I mean, the thing about it is that when you go out there to accomplish something in your life, and if you really love it, you can't let people take it away from you because of however they try and manipulate that situation. Also, first of all, there's a concept that people have to understand, that failing and failure are not the same thing. So you can fail many times, but failure only comes when you quit. When I was training real estate agents, I used to say to them, look, I don't care if you make $100,000 and then decide you want to quit. Because everybody comes into that business making nothing. There's no salary. There's no per diem. You just get you get to eat what you kill. If you make a deal, you get paid. So a lot of times you'll get people working 7 days a week for $30,000 a year. That's what they're making the first year, or even into later time. But you can easily make $250,000 if you know what you're doing and you work hard enough. So if somebody making $100,000 and they want to quit, then I know they've evaluated. They know the good and the bad of it.
Right.
But if they quit at $30,000, yeah, doing anything for $30,000 in New York City is not that much fun. Unless you've got the free living space. So, you've sometimes got to persevere until you get to where you want to be before you evaluate. And many people quit 3 feet from gold in life.
Yeah.
They get a doubt in their mind, and that slows them down. Now, here's a very interesting thing. Problem solving. If this is a problem, a wall, and I hit it, okay, if I've got a quitter mentality, I'm going to bounce off of that. I'm going to find something I'm good at, because now I found an obstacle at something I'm trying to do. I'm not good enough. But people in a growth mindset that are not in a fixed mindset, they will go over that problem, through the problem, under it, around it. They'll find a way through it because they need to get to the other side. They're not going to have that quitting mentality. And that allows them to grow and persevere to the point where they become successful.
Well, that makes sense. All right. I appreciate you coming down and telling us about both music and real estate and coaching and how all these things sort of interweave in your life. So thanks so much for coming down.
I appreciate you having me. I love the work that you guys are doing down here. And I also love to share the things I believe are important, because my mission is to help folks.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for listening. And we will see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.